thing about us. The four macromolecules are carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. Carbohydrates contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Proteins contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Lipids contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Nucleic acids contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Let's take a look for a minute at a nutrition label on a food. This is a Snickers bar. If you'll notice here, you will see words like saturated fat. The word saturated fat, including trans fat and cholesterol, are lipids. You will also see words like carbohydrates and sugars. Of course, those are the carbs. And you will also see proteins. So as you can see, these things are found in just about everything. Why is it nucleic acids on this list? Well, nucleic acids includes DNA and RNA, and they're found in every living cell. And so when food is made, all those cells that make up our food contain those nucleic acids, so we eat them just in everything that we eat automatically. Okay, I would like to talk for just a minute about monomers. The word monomer means one, and these are the building blocks, kind of like Legos. So if you imagine a monomer being like a single brick, but a polymer, which means many, would be something like a brick wall. So macromolecules are made out of these individual monomers to form polymers, which are very complex molecules. So we'll start today by talking about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates have some very important roles in our lives. When you look at the word carbohydrate, you will see the words carbon here and the word hydrogen here. Maybe you've heard of the term hydrocarbon. That's what these are. So I'm going to give you the building blocks of carbs. The building blocks of carbohydrates come in several types. The first one are called monosaccharides. These are the simplest forms of carbohydrates, and they include glucose, which is found in just about everything that we eat that's sweet, and also another one that you're familiar with called fructose. These are simple sugars. They're very simple, they're sweet to the taste, and they're used in most of our foods. Let me make sure I spell fructose correctly. There we go. The next ones are called disaccharides. Disaccharides are more complex. They're made up of two monosaccharides hooked together. An example, of course, would include sucrose, which is common table sugar found in just regular sugar that you put on your cereal. There's also others like lactose found in milk, maltose. And then the last type of carbohydrate are called polysaccharides. Polysaccharide actually means many. Okay, so to just go back up to review that, mono means one, di means two, and poly means many. These are very complex carbohydrates. Examples include starch. These would be things like you would find in potatoes or pasta. Glycogen, which you've probably never heard of, is a stored form of sugar in our liver. When we eat food, our body can store some of that sugar in our liver as glycogen. There is another one called cellulose, which is found in all plant cell walls. And then the last one is chitin, which is found in the cell walls of most fungi, like mushrooms. It's also found in some insect exoskeletons. Not all, but in some insect exoskeletons. So I guess if you step on a grasshopper or a beetle, that crunching sound you hear is the sound of chitin being broken. Okay, let's move on to the next part of this. Number 2, what are the uses of carbohydrates? Their main use, of course, is energy. We consume carbohydrates for their energy. They're also used for structure, particularly in plants where they make up the cell walls. It what give things like trees, they're great strength. So now we'll go ahead and move on to lipids. So I'll write lipids right here. Lipids, the building blocks, a little complex. They're made up of mainly what are called triglycerides. Triglycerides look something like this. They have a backbone of what we call glycerol. And then connected to the glycerol are 1, 2, 3, what are called fatty acids. So a triglyceride is 1 glycerol and 3 fatty acids. So these are the backbones, or this is the backbone of all different types of lipids. So let's go through some types. The types that maybe you've heard of are things like saturated fats. Saturated fats are usually thought of as the ones that aren't so great for us. They're long chains of carbon atoms hooked together like this, and they are usually solid at room temperature. Examples include butter, shortening, and animal fats, like a greasy hamburger. The problem with these molecules is it's very hard for the body to break the bonds down that are found in the molecules, so the body tends to want to store them. Eating lots of saturated fats is bad for us because our bodies will store them, and yes, we can get fat off of them. Another type are called unsaturated fats. Unsaturated fats are certainly much better for the body. The reason why they're called unsaturated is if you look at their structures, notice how I'm drawing double bonds every so often? Those double bonds are very important because these can be broken, and our body can break them down into smaller pieces wherever there's those double bonds. A good example of this would be like olive oil. Olive oil in the right quantities is actually very good for our bodies and actually lowers cholesterol, which we usually think about as being so bad. Okay, and then lastly on these, we have phospholipids. Phospholipids are absolutely critical because they are found in every part of our cells. If you take a look at these pictures right here, this molecule right here is a phospholipid. The top of the molecule has a part that loves the water. It's called hydrophilic. And it means water loving. They love the water. The bottom part of this is called hydrophobic. And they don't like the water. They are water hating because they're made out of fats. And if you look here at the picture of the cell, you can see that along the cell membrane, all the way on the outside right here, the inside and the outside is surrounded by these structures, and it creates what's called a bilayer. If you look at it a little bit closer, you see these little ball structures, which are the phosphates, with these double tails, which are the lipids, and they form these double structures like this, and that makes up the membranes around every single cell of your body. So as you can see, they're very, very important. Okay, the next one that are also fats, sorry about that, the next ones that are also fats are steroids. You've heard of steroids. We usually think of them as being all bad, but in fact, many of them are very good and absolutely important for our survival. Some examples of these include cholesterol. Cholesterol can be very good because it's good for our membranes. Keeps them fluid and liquid-like. So you do need to have some cholesterol in your diet. You think of others like testosterone, which is a male sex hormone. And of course, estrogen, which is the female sex hormone. Very important for both sexes, by the way. You've probably heard of anabolic steroids. Anabolic steroids build muscle, but they have some terrible side effects and they should not be used the way they often are used illegally to build muscle artificially. They're very hard on your liver, they're hard on your heart and your brain, and they can actually kill you. Birth control pills are nothing more than hormones. They're man-made versions of these steroids that help control a woman's menstrual cycle. And then finally, the uses of these, of course, because they're fats, their main use is for energy, but they're also used for storage of energy. So fats around our bodies can be used for long-term energy storage. They make up most of our hormones, and they're also some of the structural components of our bodies. Gives our skin the certain texture that it has. And that is lipids. The next one we're going to talk about is proteins. You've all heard of proteins, I'm sure. So let's go over the building blocks. The building blocks are very unique. They are called amino acids. There are 20 different kinds. And when you put the different varieties of the 20 together, it makes long chains. Chains of amino acids builds proteins. And those chains are held together by very strong, and I'm going to change colors to highlight this, very strong, can't spell today, very strong peptide bonds. These bonds hold them together. So think of it like this. You have an amino acid, a peptide bond, another amino acid, another peptide bond, and so forth and so on. And they can be thousands and thousands long in a huge chain. And these make up the proteins that are found throughout our bodies. Their uses, probably one of the most important uses of these are for structure and support. All of our muscles are made out of proteins. It's also found in our blood. Our blood is protein, hair, skin, fingernails, and many of our internal organs are made out of proteins. We have to have the right amount of proteins every single day in our diets, or it can be very detrimental for us. We eat proteins in things like any kind of meat that we eat. It's also found in things like beans, tofu, and other products. Vegetarians can get away with getting protein in these other products rather than eating meat. Okay, and then finally, the last one I want to talk about here are enzymes. Enzymes are molecules in our bodies that basically speed up chemical reactions. It makes things in our bodies work more efficiently and faster. It helps break down the food that we eat. It keeps us alive by allowing the molecules to speed up reactions so that they can occur. And that is essentially what proteins are. The last one we're going to talk about today are nucleic acids. We'll actually spend more time on nucleic acids later, but for today I'll just give a quick overview. The building blocks in nucleic acids are called nucleotides. This is a picture of a basic nucleotide. It has 3 parts. It has the phosphate, which is here. Remember, nucleic acids contain phosphate. It has a sugar, which is a special sugar called a pentose sugar, and a base. Now, bases are what binds the ladder of DNA together, as you can see in this picture. The way we remember the bonding is A goes with T, and C goes with G. And again, we will talk about this later. A good way to remember this is apples grow on trees and the cars go in the garage. There are only 2 types of nucleic acids. They are DNA, which you've heard of, deoxyribonucleic acid, and its little brother RNA, which stands for ribonucleic acid. These are the 2 main molecules. Their uses is absolutely the most important thing that there is. It Your DNA contains your genetic code.